Step one of Reflexes leadership is developing a clarity of understanding. It is the underlying framework for Reflexes leaders. It becomes our I think, therefore I do in our leadership style. Clarity of understanding is borrowed from Zen philosophy. To link first consciously and ultimately unconsciously or reflexively to the why we are who we are. Now, according to Zen philosophy, this clarity sharpens our perceptions and our abilities to purposely and thoughtfully navigate through our lives. For Reflexes leadership, that same meaningfulness and thoughtfulness is used to actively make us present and available in our school settings. Meaningfulness and thoughtfulness, mind and heart, are the two components necessary to develop a clarity of understanding, or simply put, the who of understanding and the why of understanding. Now, I'm sure some of you are familiar with the novelist Lloyd Alexander. He's a Newbery Award winner who primarily writes or wrote young adult sci-fi fantasy novels. Truth be told, that genre is a closet love of mine. I have an extensive collection of his books and all of Ray Bradbury's short stories and novels. Thank goodness for those little covers that you can put over books so no one knows what you're reading. Now, the most famous of Alexander's books probably was The Black Cauldron, and that's thanks to Disney turning it into one of their puppet movies. However, my favorite is from the series called The Chronicles of Prydain. And in one of these books in the series, called The Taran Wanderer, Amlor Clayshaper says to the hero one of my most favorite and most quoted quotes of all time. See, Taran is looking for his identity and wants Amlor to accompany him on the quest. And Amlor tells Taran, I'm not going with you because I know well who I am. And for better or worse, that knowledge must serve me a lifetime. The simple fundamental truth of this quote becomes the framework for the first step of Reflexes leadership, clarity of understanding. Truly understanding who we are transcends and transforms our confidence and our learned skills. We all know the qualities we need to be a good leader. Remember, we learned them as children. However, the importance of how we lead is interdependent on clearly understanding our motivators or detractors. In essence, who we are. So, how many of you know who you are? If I was to ask you right now, hey, who are you? Could you give me a clear picture? And maybe more importantly, would your self-image of who you are be the same as others' perceptions of who you say you are? To become a leader worth bragging about, our self-image and others' perception of us must be synced. To do this, we must develop a clarity of understanding about who we are. This understanding will make us genuine and available to all our constituents. Show of hands, please. How many of you have ever taken an assessment that gives you insight into who you are and how you react and interact to others? How many of you done this since you've become an administrator? Reflexes leaders know this level of knowledge and self-reflection is crucial to the success as a leader. Reflexes leaders use a scientific, reliable, and valid assessment tool to begin understanding who they are. Now, there are a lot of assessments out there, but the one I like personally is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or as it's sometimes called, the MBTI. The MBTI is based on Carl Jung's theory of psychological types. Now, this isn't a personality test, but rather it's a self-assessment that, depending on your responses, gives you a valid indicator of how you see things. Now, according to the MBTI's distributed description, the Myers-Briggs is an indicator of where your attention is focused, how you take in information, the way you make decisions based on that information, and finally, how you perceive or deal with the world. Now, I found that this assessment and other similar assessment results will provide information and a foundation for thought-provoking introspection and a better clarity of understanding of who we are. And like Animal Clay Shaper, it allows us to see and know our own better or for worse. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator or other research-based assessments like it begins our clarity of understanding. However, most of our training in leadership, or mine anyway, focus primarily on the how of leadership. How many of you had to do those, I will insert my own adjective, annoying inbox simulations when you were in school? I'm sure you all remember how you were given a list of scenarios, and in a finite amount of time, you had to prioritize them in order based on importance. Scenario 1, I think the reported small but contained and now extinguished grease fire in the cafeteria should take precedence over calling back Mrs. Jones again about her son Johnny's failing grades. You can fill in your own reasons why you would make a decision. Now, at first look, these exercises do appear to prepare you for the day-to-day scenarios that you will run into as a school leader. Of course, we have to prioritize what we do and then rationalize how we're going to do it. Our training primarily focuses on how to perform effectively, not on why we do it in the first place. And if we do look at why we're doing something, it usually is framed in some external reason. District policy, school policy, well, that's just how we do things around here. even when we answer the question with I think or I believe, it still may be only a superficial nod to why we think that way. And in reality, is still based on a textbook response and knowledge that we have bound by our interpretation of the information. However, looking only at the how to be effective and how we respond really isn't enough to move us to extraordinary. Just like the demonstration we did earlier, without understanding the why, there really couldn't be any other answer than this is a pen. As I told you earlier, I have two grandchildren. My granddaughter is 3 years old. Now, if any of you have ever spent any time with a 3-year-old, you know that it's both enlightening and exhausting. Besides being continual motion machines, 3-year-olds ask a lot of questions, and I mean a lot. And almost every question starts with the word, that's right, the word why. Why is the light red? Why is the sky blue? Why is the toast a different color? Why, for just about everything. And just when you think you've answered the question, the light is red because it lets the cars know when to stop, honey. What do they go and do? That's right. They ask it again, and this time usually a little more insistently. But why do the cars know when to stop? Bless their little hearts, it's unending. And as the saying goes, not only 3-year-olds, but inquiring minds want to know. Reflexes leadership, in addition to understanding the how we do or do something, that's our skill sets, form a litmus test for why we are thinking about how we're going to do something. We form a litmus test for why we are thinking about how we're going to do something. Remember, we think, therefore we do. We need to bend back all our actions to understand our thought process. Now, this can be done by something called the 5-why method, and it wasn't invented by a 3-year-old. Now, you might already be familiar with this technique. It was developed to find the root cause of a specific problem. You might already use this technique for analyzing a problem in your own school. You ask the question why to every answer for at least 5 go-rounds till you arrive at the root cause or the actual reason for that problem. So, by applying the 5-why method, we can usually find a root cause which we can use to reveal the actual problem that now we can address. With practice, this process becomes quicker and yet even reflexive to look for the root causes of situations as opposed to the surface symptoms. Now, what if we adapted the 5-why method and applied it not only to a situation, but also to our thought process about the problem. Reflexive leadership does exactly that and exposes our real thinking or root thoughts about the actual situation. Let's take a minute and think about something that bothers us or really, really irritates us. For me, it has to be those people in front of me at the supermarket that have more than 10 items on the express lane. I cannot tell you how this used to annoy me. I would death stare at that 11th and 12th item as it went down the conveyor belt. I would deeply sigh as the cashier rang up those last two items. And when the person left, I usually made some not so nice comment or snarky remark to the cashier about that person. My response to that situation was always the same: deep irritation bordering on anger. Because how dare those people think they can get away with it? But what was it? Stealing 2 minutes of my time? But when I learned to apply the 5 why method and direct it not just to the situation, but also to my feelings and thoughts on why this event caused such a visceral response, the root answer would change my response. Now, I still felt that those people were rude and should follow the rules. And I still believed it was unfair. Because remember, we can't change our feelings. We can only change the way we react to them. When I got to the 5th why, I found an almost forgotten experience when there was a situation of unfairness and a person having an advantage over me. So, whenever I was in that situation that reflected those feelings, I reacted unconsciously or involuntarily to all those future events, stuck with the thoughts and feelings of a consciously forgotten event. I am not in the present, but caught in the feelings of a past experience. With this clarity of understanding, my perspective and perceptions changed. I became aware of my anger and its inappropriateness in the present situation at the supermarket. I was able and willing to give people 2 or 3 minutes of my time. I think, therefore I do. Now, let's think about something that really irritates or annoys you at your school. Ask yourself the 5 why questions for every response you have. Start with, why does this really irritate or annoy me? Did you discover a reason other than your initial thoughts on why that particular situation always evokes that response from you? If some of you answered, nope, that person is still rude, or no, I believe that that situation should always dictate that response. Remember, in the beginning, it sometimes takes more than 5 questions to reach the root answer. Practice, however, makes the process go quicker, And eventually it becomes a reflexive or involuntary reaction to every problematic situation. This is a linear approach towards the clarity of understanding. Clarity of understanding is a decision, something that must be monitored and practiced. What thought process brought you to this understanding of the current situation? And what thought process is dictating how you're planning to deal with it? How can you accurately choose the correct response? How can you do that quickly? And remember Piaget, your thoughts might have the details or feelings of being correct when in reality they really are not. Clarity of understanding allows us to first consciously examine any biases, partial information, or misinformation we may be bringing to that situation. As leaders, we never want the perception of others to be, there they go again, or, they always react that way in that situation. We use the 5 whys to examine our thinking that makes that clarity and understanding. Or, in other words, reflects the understanding our response to that situation. We understand better where we stand, our better or for worse, and no longer try to understand and fix a problem from a biased point of view or because that's our predestined way of doing things. Clarity of understanding allows us to be fully vested in the present situation and be available to the other people involved. This automatic reflexes availability and presence in the present is how reflexive leaders begin to blend heart and mind and become leaders worth bragging about. Let me give you an example. A principal at a private school shared with me his disciplinary dilemma for one of the students at his school and wanted to ask my advice on how to handle this very, very difficult situation. Now, according to this principal, this student deliberately and with malice pushed all of his buttons and actively sought out confrontations with him. He spoke to the principal disrespectfully and encouraged other students to do the same. The principal went on to report that this student actually set up a sting operation. So what happened? The principal was walking by the classroom where he had the good fortune, the principal's words, to see the student on his cell phone. Now this is a major infraction at this man's school. He walked into the classroom and demanded the cell phone, very happy to now be able to get all of this nonsense behind him. Now, it turned out though that the student didn't have his cell phone. He had turned it in earlier to be charged, which was allowed at that school. And he actually was on a calculator, pretending it was a cell phone. Well, the principal was furious. But the story doesn't end there. A few days later, the principal again had the good fortune of catching the student walking out of the cafeteria eating a bag of potato chips. Well, that's a minor infraction at this principal's school. The principal confronted the student in the hall and demanded the bag of potato chips. The student put the potato chips behind his back and said, "What bag of potato chips?" The principal called the student on his lie, and the student laughed, said, "Okay, you got me," and went to throw the bag of chips in the garbage, laughing the whole time, causing the other kids around him to laugh also. The principal became furious and demanded the student go to his office. Well, as you can imagine, the conversation deteriorated from that point until the student asked to be sent home. The principal's dilemma? He wanted to know what was the right number of days to suspend that student for causing an unsafe condition in the hall, disrespect, and insubordination. He wanted it to be the right number of days that would reach that student and send a clear message to all the other students in the hall. Now you look shocked, but I kid you not, this is a true story. My response was, you have two options. One, you can figure out how the student knows what buttons of yours to push and come to some clarity of understanding of why you have these interactions with this student on this level. Or you can expel the student, because I guarantee you that this is going to happen again and again. Well, I'd like to tell you that the principal followed my advice, applied the 5 why method, and was able to come to a better arrangement and a better relationship with that student. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And a few months later, that principal called me and said, he reminded me of my brother and all the things my brother used to do to make me look bad. Well, turns out that the principal and the boy had more than 3 more run-ins. And I want to read to you what their parents wrote. When they decided to remove the boy from the school, based on the deep and biased dislike of their son, it made it impossible for them to allow their child to remain in that school. And that's exactly how the parents wrote it when they demanded a full refund of their tuition to the Board of Trustees. Because that principal lacked the clarity of understanding of why that student irritated him so much, he was unavailable for that student. The student was locked with the principal in an illogical battle of wits. The principal was unclear on how to proceed because for him, it wasn't about the situation. It was not about what was happening in the moment. It was a compilation of thoughts and events and feelings. There was no accurate way for either of them to determine the next logical step because only one of them, the student, was available in the present. How different the situation might have turned out if the principal understood the why of his thinking and could have altered his responses to that situation. Have a clarity of why you're thinking about this interaction, situation, or task in a certain way. Reflexes leaders incorporate step two, an accuracy of understanding. Reflexive leadership begins with looking to ourselves first to ensure that our thinking on any situation is clear. Once we've established our self-understanding on how we do things and why we do them, we must make sure that we not only accurately understand and state our position, but we also must accurately understand the other participants' points of view as well. We must remove our arbitration biases and develop our best mediation skills. These skills must be honed until they are reflexive and become a part of who we are. Reflexive leaders routinely use a clarity and accuracy of understanding to shape, create, and bring about the best possible results for everyone in almost every situation. As educational leaders, we are asked to make decisions every day. We're asked for our opinion. We're asked to judge. We're asked to settle a myriad of situations, from the mundane to the strange. Once, when I was a principal in Florida, I was asked to immediately go to the maintenance shed and meet with the head maintenance man. The reason? Seems there was a lizard or a snake stuck in the air conditioner system, causing the air conditioner not to work at full capacity. And the maintenance man wanted me to see this. Our decisions are usually viewed as a final arbitration, unless, of course, the other parties appeal to a higher authority, or, as we spoke of earlier, begin a cycle of negative comments and criticism. How others perceive our decision depends on our ability to create an accuracy of understanding. Almost all decisions we are faced or confronted with probably need a final judgment. But these decisions require the patience of mediation. In other words, we must find an answer that all involved might not necessarily agree with 100%, but everyone would feel it was fair and a decision, answer, or situation that they could live with. To accomplish this, reflexive leaders make sure they have an accurate understanding of what is really being asked. As mentioned earlier, they apply the 5 whys to the situation. This is not only to determine the accurate root cause, but also to establish a clarity of understanding through accurate understanding. Not only what the person is saying, but why are they saying it? For instance, why in the world would the maintenance man think it was important for me to look at fried reptiles? Now, there is a catch, however. When we only use the 5 why technique, we are bound by our thought process and can only guess why the request or the interaction is important. Using another technique for mediation, we can and must make the assumption that because the situation has developed, it is significant to the other person. Remember, it isn't always lonely at the top. Too many times, leaders trivialize the importance of another person's perspective because they inaccurately frame the exchange through a singular point of view, their own. In order to avoid this, what must we do? Anyone? Exactly. We must accurately understand what it is the person is saying, but probably more importantly, why they're saying it in the first place. It is then and only then we can decide on the next logical course of action. Back to my lizard stuffed air conditioning unit. I would flexibly ask myself the 5 whys and know why this situation seems unimportant to me. 1, I'm not hot, so the air conditioner is still working. And 2, I am not a big fan of reptiles in general. I would rather someone, anyone else, deal with snakes and or lizards. So I call the maintenance man because I'm still not going into that creepy shed. And I ask him the first question. Any guesses? Right. Why are there unidentifiable reptiles in our air conditioner? However, there is an initial statement before the question when we're trying to establish an accuracy of understanding. Reflexes leaders use a validating statement prior to the question. This sounds serious. Why are there reptiles in the air conditioner? By using the first of the 5 whys and looking for the precise reason and validating the participant with the statement, we are able to mediate effectively. We make the participants feel they are being heard and being respected. They become equal partners in our discussion. Why are there reptiles in the air conditioner? Answer? Well, there is that hole in the unit's base. Again, the why question is preceded by a validating statement. That sounds even more serious than snakes or reptiles. Why is there a hole in the base of our air conditioner? Answer. It is serious and keeps getting more so. I told that last principal about it a couple of times, but they just told me they didn't care as long as the air conditioner kept working. And it didn't break down altogether. So now the hole is bigger, and like I said, and no one would listen, anything can clog that unit. And with 3 questions left, like the song says, duh, there it is. This really wasn't about reptiles or even about the air conditioner. It was about validating the maintenance man's professional knowledge. Without clarity of understanding, I too would have given this a low, very low priority in my inbox. I would have had the secretary call him back and tell him the air conditioner seems to be working fine. Get rid of whatever out there. Without developing a clarity of understanding of why the maintenance man needed me to actually see the problem, he would have perceived me in the same way he did the former principal. I just didn't care what he had to say. So, I told the maintenance man he was the expert. I trusted his decision and how he would want to handle it. I asked him what had to be done, again validating him, and to give me an estimated cost and timeline. He got back to me in less than 5 minutes with all the details, including pictures of the air conditioner hole and whatever it was that was in that hole. This situation became a win-win. The maintenance man felt trusted and respected, and I never had to go into that creepy shed. Asking questions is a major part of being an administrator. Part of my leadership training was to learn how to ask good questions. Once perfected, the good questioning technique would lead to good answers. Again, this seemed very reasonable. However, when I was an administrator for a very short while, I realized this is what I began to call a categories approach. Now, category is a not so popular game that through the years I've played with just about every member of my family. After rolling a hexagon-shaped die with letters on each side, the object of the game is to think of a word that begins with that letter and match it to a list of 10 unrelated nouns. You're challenged to be creative and try not to match your opponent's words. This categories approach to questioning has its origins in this game. Based on what's being said, asked, or presented, you try and match good questions to the situation and determine how you should answer or proceed in that situation. The questions are then scattered into the conversation or applied to that situation. And you hope you found the right fit for that particular incident. And just like the game, because you've already determined what the problem is, you consciously choose questions to match your assumption. With this categories approach, once you've determined, based on your good questions and the answer, what needs to be done, you make a judgment and arbitrate a decision. But what if the good questions were not the right questions? What if they don't lead to a true accuracy of understanding, only to our bound assumptions of what's needed to be done or said? And we all know what happens when we assume. For administrators, it might be even worse, because the perception can become that of uncaring or untruthfulness in our leadership. Even a seemingly good question like, why does your daughter have so much trouble following simple rules? Or, why can't you ever meet your paperwork deadline? These are good questions I've actually heard asked. And as you can imagine, these types of questions ended with unexpected answers and unintended consequences. Reflexes leaders develop an intuitive understanding of the right questions to ask. This furthers their right-mindedness and others' perception of their genuineness and availability. Through practice, they become reflexive in not only knowing the right questions to ask themselves, but also through those right questions, establish a clarity of understanding and an accurate understanding of others as well. Instead of a categories approach, reflexive leaders use an assigning approach to questioning. Based on effective questioning techniques in mediation, the assigning approach eliminates ambiguity and the assumption that everyone involved understands the situation in the same way. The assigning approach creates an alignment or an accuracy of understanding. It validates the participants by asking the right question, first of ourselves and then of the other participants. Based on the 4-question technique, the assigning approach questions are arranged in a hierarchy for understanding. They are always phrased in the positive. They are constructive and framed in a way that establishes a rapport that allows all participants to arrive at the same position. When these steps are taken, the questions are not perceived as a judgment. Remember the why can't your daughter ever question? They're not perceived as a judgment because they're not. Nor are they perceived as being used to manipulate or maneuver because they don't. The assigning approach to questions are used to focus, engage, and direct. It reveals a clarity of understanding of what really is being asked and what really needs to be done. The assigning approach of reflexive leadership have 4 main goals to accurately understand and address any situation. Clarity. Why is what we are discussing meaningful or important to you or to me? Accuracy. What is the real cause of the conversation, problem, or situation? Precision. Will the decision solve the actual problem, or is further clarity of understanding needed? And finally, accession. Have I asked the right questions, phrased in the positive, to validate others and to remove any unintended consequences that might occur? Reflexive leaders questions their thinking and validate the other participants' feelings and thoughts. Instead of merely weighing presented facts to arbitrate a decision, Reflexis leaders want to assure that they have an accuracy of understanding. They mediate an approach of clear understanding, and that's to clear up any misunderstanding, and facilitate clear communications. Reflexis leaders make sure they say what they mean and they mean what they say.